Well, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the HR Revolution. It's the revolution of HR for the evolution of business. And we do this through conversations with thought leaders, experts, and HR leaders themselves to really learn from their experiences and pull out that intellectual and social capital that they have through years of experience as HR continues this evolution to become that stronger business partner within the organizations, as more and more CEOs continue to look at HR and really want to see a stronger, more value creation center, if you will. So, and here we are with terms with the Great Resignation, and not better to talk with Barb. But first, I wanted to kick it over to my friend Chris to give us a warm introduction to Barb and give you a little history.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you, Kevin. As you all know, if you've been following along, this is a passion project between Kevin and a small group of us where we aim to help out, whether it's HR executives who are just trying to make sure that, they're benchmarking and tracking along the right way. Maybe it's new individuals who are curious about the HR profession, or it's just experienced HR practitioners and professionals as well. But it is always our intent to gain at least a few aha moments in all of our conversations. And today that should be very easy as we welcome Barb Ross, the Executive Vice President of Human Resources for Conifer Realty. Barb is a strategic HR executive who has an impressive record of building dynamic organizations, shaping business strategy, and revitalizing underperforming operations. In addition to Conifer Realty, Barb has held leadership positions at Monro Inc, Chobani, Rochester Institute of Technology, and Constellation Brands, just to name a few. So there's some impressive names there. On behalf of Kevin and myself, we want to thank you, Barb, for taking time out of your busy schedule to talk with us today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. My pleasure.
Well, Barb, let's we always know that HR professionals typically are working 80 hours a week, 100 hours a week, and sometimes it's tough to get to that life or that work-life balance or blend that we're talking about today. But Chris and I really want to know what motivates you. So, what was the best part about your day today so far?
Best part of my day. I would say I like that it's sunny out and I could wash my car and it wasn't going to get covered with snow on the way in.
There you go. There you go. That's one of the joys of living in upstate New York, right?
Yeah, the timing of the car wash. Yeah, you're looking at that 5-day outlook.
That's great.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, what's one thing that maybe people wouldn't know about you just from, reading your LinkedIn profile, or maybe they've worked with you in the past but didn't get to know you very well? What's one thing that generally people might be surprised to learn about you?
Well, I actually live in the Finger Lakes, so I'm down towards between like Canandaigua and Naples. So it's almost an hour commute for me to come into Rochester. And so I'm a country girl. I live in a county that literally has more cows than people. And I don't have any neighbors, that are really close by. So yeah, so I'm a country girl.
That is really, really cool. Well, then I'm going to ask, because I think we can learn a lot from people and what type of music that they like. If I was to catch you on that hour-long commute and you had to choose one song and listen to on repeat for 60 minutes, what song are you picking, Barb?
Oh, that's a tough one. I like country music, but the song, well, if it's only 60 seconds, Drift Away is a long song. So that's nice because you can kind of sing along and it lasts a while. But on my commute, I actually listen to books. I rarely listen to music. Music is for the, home and while I'm cleaning, all that good stuff.
That's awesome. Well, let's jump right into it, because I think you've worked at some of the most crown jewels of Rochester as of late. I mean, we hear of RIT. My grandfather graduated from there many, many moons ago. Constellation Brands continues to evolve and change and adapt. Monro Muffler seems to be buying every oil change and tire center that I've ever entered before in my life. And now here you are at Conifer Realty, kind of a leading edge real estate developer and maintenance and property. What did you learn in this whole journey? Like, my first question is, what was your first job, Barb, before you got into everything?
Yeah, my very first job out of school was with Manpower Temporary Services. I was a recruiter.
Yeah.
And it's, that kind of a job is a great opportunity to learn the local companies, because you have to understand the companies if you're going to make a good match on putting people in the roles. And it also, that kind of volume recruiting, you learn a lot about the different jobs that are out there and what it takes to be good at them. So it's a great learning opportunity, as it was for me.
That's amazing. And the one I'm going to piggyback off of, because that was some years ago. And then here we are talking about the challenges in recruiting and then attracting talent today. What are some of the biggest things that you're hearing of differences between when you were recruiting and here we are where we are today, Barb?
Well, I think, what people are looking for in an employer is different. With this whole world of learning how to do things virtually, I think people have come to appreciate and look for a couple things. Number one is the ability to work from home, at least part of the time. I think that a lot of people want a mixture. And then the other thing is just general flexibility. If nothing else, COVID taught us to be nimble, and, you never know what's going to happen. And so looking for that flexibility of, look, if I have to do something at home for a couple hours, on my own time and then come in a little bit later, is that okay? I think more and more people are looking for that.
I think you bring up a great point there, Barb. So we'll get into the attraction and retention and development of the talent within the workforce in a little bit, but you brought up the theme of COVID, right? It taught us a lot that we had to be very flexible, we had to be agile, we had to be nimble, we had to be responsive very quickly. And one of the things that I think is fascinating now is you have, these strategic planning processes that organizations are going through. And it used to be, okay, let's look at our 3-year plan, right? Let's look at our 5-year plan. What's happening there? Are we throwing the 3 and the 5-year plans out the window and now just focusing on what's going on today and where do we want to be over the next 6 months? How long can we look out into the future from a strategic standpoint now when it comes to strategic planning, do you think?
Yeah, I think you still have to have that long-term vision of where you're trying to go.
Yeah.
You have to be flexible to know that those plans along the way might need to change. But you have to have that longer term goal that you're shooting for. I think one thing, I saw an article not too long ago that was like, people have stopped trying to figure out when people are going back in the office, right? Everyone was saying, oh, 3 more months. And we don't know. And we don't know what's going to work right for people. So I think looking at 5-year plans, 3-year plans, it still is important, and it's important to do kind of your 1-year operational plan, but knowing that you have to build in that flexibility that, like, okay, if our whole office gets COVID, what are we going to do, and how do we still move forward?
The contingency plan, I think, process has changed, where now we have a wider menu of things that might happen, just knowing what's going on over the past 2 years, things we never would have thought about, right? So working 100% remotely, now that's one of our areas that we're focusing on. What are we going to do if that's what happens down the road? So it's an interesting dynamic, I think, in the change that we've seen take place from a strategic long-term planning process.
Definitely. Yeah. And Barb, one of the things that you said that I kind of want to go back to is what else is evolving, what else is changing, right, due to the pandemic. And I think if anybody has spent any time on LinkedIn or Forbes or any of these Harvard Business Reviews, leadership is kind of right in the spotlight right now, or the style of leadership, emotional intelligence. We're hearing all these different terminologies and things. And my question to you is, seeing that you have had so many years of experience, and I know recently kicked off a leadership summit there at Conifer, are you of the proponent that managers are better at managing the work, and should it be 2 different roles, a manager and a leadership role?
That's an interesting concept. I think whether you're in a leadership position, whether you're managing tactical operations that have to happen, or you're a coworker, I think right now everybody needs to just be a human and understand that we're all in this together. And I think that is one of the benefits of there's not many silver linings in this whole COVID thing,
Yeah.
but I think being there for each other and recognizing that it's important on so many levels, but including being able to keep a business running, right? I talked to one CEO who said that people were kind of covering for each other, and somebody said, well, is that fair? And he said to his employees, no, it isn't, but we're all in this together. And in a couple of weeks, you might be the one that needs a little bit more. And so I think that is a big thing. So with leaders and managers, I think you still have to be thinking about people and leading with humility and understanding that we're all people, and the relationships, I think, are the most important thing in leadership.
I couldn't agree more. Could not agree
Along
more.
those lines, yeah, you look at, so it brought out the humanistic element, not only in leadership, but I think in day-to-day operations. A very, highlighted attention is being given to diversity, equity, inclusion now as well, given the social economic circumstances that happened with George Floyd. And after that, all the organizations that I've seen and that we've talked to have now said, this is not a check the box activity when it comes to inclusion or equity. It has to be woven into the fabrication. So what I'm seeing, I guess the question would be, how has it changed? Maybe even at Conifer or previous organizations where you had DE&I initiatives, and where do you see it going to?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think companies that have been doing it for a long time, I think they were in a really great place, and organizations and leadership teams that were really committed to it. For those that weren't, so didn't have a specific focus on it, I think the important thing is don't pretend you know how to do it. I think I encourage anybody who's looking to start something to begin with a consultant who can help you figure out where are you now and what are the right next steps. We did that here. We brought in a consultant and did kind of a baseline to understand where we were and what was important to our employees. Because the worst thing you can do is hang the sign on the door that this is what you're doing and then not do it right. That's even worse than not doing anything at all.
Exactly.
I love that. And I've seen that. And I think you've probably seen it during your time as well, as like just putting it up on the wall is not good enough anymore, and I think people are starting to challenge that, it's like, hey, wait a minute, that doesn't live up to this value. And here we are in HR, we're looked at to being the shepherds of that culture, right? Upholding the mission, vision and value statements, finding that purpose or connecting individuals to unlock their purpose or alignment with their strengths in some of these positions. And that comes down to having some critical conversations yourself, Barb, I'm sure, over the years. And one of the things that I noticed is that you kind of talked about how you stepped into this new role at Conifer, and I believe the turnover rate was about 52% you had shared, and you had got it down to 35. We talk about problem managers or challenging leaders within the organization that might be a cause to some of this additional turnover. How do you have these critical conversations with these managers and to get them on that path of learning these new skills that may be required in leadership today?
I think one key to any kind of situation where you are having a difficult conversation is, think of them as human, trying to find the common goal. What are you both trying to accomplish? And I think it's important to ask a lot of questions before you dive into giving your opinion, because you might be wrong, for one thing. We see more and more that people have a whole lot going on in their personal life that you know nothing about. You have no idea what struggles they're having, and it may have absolutely nothing to do with work. So I think asking a lot of questions and testing your theories before you even start talking about coaching and how to do things better, I think is important. Also, having a couple of options kind of in your back pocket of things that might be a good path forward is good to do. And it's okay to say, I'm not sure what the right path is. Let's come back together in another day or two.
Like that.
I love that, because sometimes it's admitting that you don't know, right? Or you're working towards that. But I too saw that during the pandemic more than ever, is that asking more questions was probably the best way to do that, to actually understand or build awareness or build understanding with what possibly could be going on in that person's world or that day. And it kind of started to highlight the dangers of assumptions, right? As we assume a lot as human nature. And like you said, is like, if we go in there with the assumption and then we're totally off, then rebuilding that trust back is a lot harder. So thank you for sharing that. I think that was really, really awesome to hear. So I appreciate it.
Yeah. I guess along those lines, was there anything else, Barb, that maybe you implemented to get that, turnover rate down? Anything you could share with us for, for organizations where we've got a turnover issue too? I'm wondering what worked for Barb at Conifer. Maybe we can learn a couple of things. What did the data tell you? Did it point you in a certain direction to take some actions in order to help bring that down? Anything you could share would be fantastic.
Yeah, I think the key is really communication, and it's two-way communication. So it's understanding, getting feedback from your employees, what's important for them, what do they love about the company, and what do they wish should be different. Regular communication, again, even if you don't know the answer, but getting out there saying, we're thinking about it, we're waiting for XYZ to happen in order to give you answers. We know it's on your mind, but we don't have that information at this time. But regular communication and doing it in different modes, right? Some people, they want to get a text or they want to see it on your blog. Others want to see a video or read a newsletter. So understanding that there are different ways to reach people and building in all of those so that you have your best chance at reaching people. But really, I think communication is key. I think one thing that really is far more powerful than people think about is our open town halls, even virtual ones, where you are just opening up the floor. We did a lot of communication here, particularly when we had a change in CEO. And so we tried to script it, but not sound scripted, and we sounded scripted. So we learned that we had to just not have notes in front of us. And that was the only way to be genuine, because there again, if you look like you're acting, people won't believe you. If you have to be genuine. And so those town halls where people can ask questions, and you can't be afraid of it, because if something comes up that's tough, you can say, it's a great question, let me get back to you.
Yeah.
I think just that help to rebuild or start to rebuild that trust with people is being vulnerable, right? Or the appearance of being more transparent than they ever were before. And that's kind of what I talk to people is like that's some of the people that are sitting on the sidelines waiting to come back to work is they're waiting to really see, and they're distrusting of these environments because of the way that they were told that they were furloughed. And sometimes when we over-explain or over-communicate and talk about the actual business impacts and let people understand that profit and loss statement that all the senior leadership is staring at, sometimes they can take their individual approach and understand how they're directly impacting the business themselves, where they can take maybe a future impact. So I love the town halls because I think it's a great way to establish that transparency, even during that switch over to a new CEO, which can be that opportunity for confusion. People get some cold feet. They're not really sure what the future direction of the company is, and then they start headed for the exits. Speaking which, you had to fill in for a little while. I believe 6 months you were filling in with the CFO there at Conifer. What was the one biggest thing, because I know you have built and established strong relationships with CEOs in the past, and I know you understand kind of what motivates them, and finding those win-win scenarios that you talked about earlier, Barb. But what was the biggest lesson that you learned being and filling in as the interim CEO for 6 months?
I think one of the biggest things that helped us be successful is the relationship that we have with each other. Interestingly, we had worked for about 2 years on building the relationships amongst the leadership team. So we trusted each other. We knew we had each other's backs. We knew what our strengths were and what our strengths weren't. So when it came time for us to not have a CEO, the CFO and I partnered to take on interim co-CEO role. And we just leveraged what each of us did better, and we leveraged the rest of the leadership team, so that I'm not an expert on how to deal with an agency on a housing issue. So leaving it to our experts. And I think our job as leaders is always making sure that our employees have the tools that they need to do their job and removing roadblocks for them so that they can be successful and do what they do best. And I think that that is true no matter what role you're in. But in that CEO role, I think it's really important to let your employees know that that's what's important, and that is what your goal is, and that you're looking for that feedback.
And how to kind of, I guess, ask a twofold question here is Chris and I are frequent in talking about establishing and building that level of accountability within the organization, because it doesn't happen overnight. Just because you start with the title of VP of Human Resources doesn't mean that accountability and trust is just automatically given to you. How did you work with CFO and the finance teams so they could understand that you do need to sometimes make investments in technology in order to enable the success, whether it's technology, whether it's process improvement, whether it's outsourcing, whatever it is, but sometimes it takes money to make money or improve, right? And sometimes finance, my father being one of them, is they're very close to the chest. You know, they don't want to spend money unless they see a clear return on investment. How have you built that relationship to get to that trust and be able to leverage each other's strengths and understand how to best work together in order to move Conifer forward?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the first thing that's most important is you have to understand your business. You have to understand how the company makes money. How does the money flow? What is your revenue source? What are if it's a cyclical business, what are your busy times? What are your not busy times? When I was at Constellation Brands, the fall, it's Crush.
Is that the beer season? That's the beer and wine season, fall.
Yeah. Well, you have to, the grapes are ready, right? The grapes are ready.
Time to do the harvest, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So launching a major initiative in the middle of Crush is not a good idea. So, understanding what challenges are within the business, I think is really important. And a great way to get a little bit of traction is to request to do a pilot. Can I try a pilot somewhere? Let's take a team or, a group of employees or a project, and let's just try. Let's just experiment and see what happens and track the numbers or the metrics that you're using and see how it works. And oftentimes you're right. I mean, we know what we're doing in HR. Yeah. We know that these investments will pay off. So it's giving it a chance to prove itself out.
I love the pilot. And then your point about reassessing the effectiveness through numbers is huge too.
And understanding the business is always nice to see it reinforced, right? What do you mean, Kevin? When you just start off with the fancy title, people don't automatically give you the you actually earn that? Oh,
that's wow. The dream. That's the dream.
You gotta earn that. Well, let's talk a little bit about, we talked a little bit about attraction, and I want to talk about retention, because a lot of organizations, that's kind of the big focus. If you look, what are the 3 main priorities for HR this year? It's okay, we need to retain, our talent, not only our top talent, but also, all of the talent that we have, because we don't want to lose folks. What are some of the things that maybe you're doing at Conifer to help, reinforce the retention? Maybe some other things you've seen going on, and just to say to your employees, hey, we value you, we want you to stay here, we want you to build a career here. What's going on? What are you doing?
Yeah, so we did a few things, actually, not necessarily related to it was related to retention earlier in the pandemic, before this big staffing crunch hit, was just really trying to have a pulse on what's important to our employees. So, for example, that first year of the COVID crisis, our site employees, so Conifer is an affordable housing business. We have about 220 apartment communities in 4 states. So our site folks that are there every day with the residents, they were essential workers. They had to go to work every day. We did, for that summer, that first year, we called it Gratitude Fridays, where we let people leave at noon on Friday and we paid them for the full day. We didn't make them use PTO. So it wasn't necessarily like a bonus, but it was time, and people value that more than anything, especially in the middle of the COVID stuff. You had kids that needed to be learning stuff or whatever. You just needed that flexibility. So understanding what's important to your employees at any given time. Once all of these new hire bonuses and stuff started happening, and with this turnover and this staffing craziness. One thing that we just did is, historically, we did gifts for service awards, and they would, it was nominal, but they were nice gifts, but they were nominal. And people were like, okay, I've been here for 10 years and this new person is getting a sign-on bonus. So we said, let's convert our service awards to cash. That way they can go buy what's important to them or spend the money the way it is that means the most to them. And if it is still buying, one of those items that they would have gotten before, great. But if not, letting them understand that they're important to us. And so understanding what is thinking about. And you also have to remember, right now in this time, it feels like it's changing every 3 months, right? What people are looking for and what's important. So keeping a regular pulse on what's important to people, I think, is one of the keys. And honestly, telling people that you care and showing it and really demonstrating it. We added a couple of extra holidays because people were really burnt out. We shut down between Christmas and New Year's for the first time ever at our sites. And again, did not require them to use PTO. They were burnt out. And so little things that you can do, I think, make a world of difference. And explaining to your folks, to your people, that it's because we care and we know that this kind of a thing is going to be really important to you, goes a long way.
I couldn't agree more. We're starting to read things like individualized HR, meeting where people are at and focusing on those critical life events like babies and weddings. And but it seems like Conifer is really in tune with that burnout conversation, because you're seeing the advantages of time, right? We can't buy more of it. We can't rent more of it. There's only so many hours in the day. And then you touched on too, is like sometimes when we have good employees and we are focused and they know that we care, sometimes they're going above and beyond often from an overtime perspective, from doing 2 jobs as one person. And I love the back to your point about the awards, and how that has changed, but that kind of goes back to what you said from a flexibility perspective. I think people like options right now. An award that we're going to put up on a wall, that's kind of limiting. I think a lot of people, like you said, hey, you use the cash to whatever you feel like you want to use it towards, I think is a great way. And speaking to really how connected you are with what people are looking for today. So that's awesome to hear. One of the things that you mentioned was time, right? And this is something that Chris and I and my friends talk about quite frequently in HR, is that HR is awesome at protecting the business, protecting the employees, protecting just about everything except their own time. They're very, very poor at protecting their own time, which kind of gets into the frustration category for HR professionals. Is I got a laundry list over here of strategic initiatives, but all my time is focused on administrative, right? How do I make that work? And my question to you, Barb, is how do you protect your time, and how do you coach your team in HR to protect their time as well, so you can increase your impact within the organization?
Yeah, you're assuming that I'm good at it.
Well, after hearing your history of playing interim CEO, 94 straight on Glassdoor and all this other stuff, I figured you might have some skills in that area.
Well, all kidding aside, it's hard, and we're still guilty of it. We have a new CEO, and we look at these projects that we want to do, and they are all important. And we just looked at our list for this calendar year, and we thought, there's no way we're going to get all of this done. So you do have to be practical. I have found that for me and my team, one thing that is an effective way to manage time and to actually cross the finish line with projects is similar to, if you think about the structure of an IT department, you've got people who they work on infrastructure. You've got people who are break fix, right? Your desktop technicians and stuff. And then you have project people who that's all they're doing is making sure that these projects get done. I think you have to have the same thing in HR, working on the day-to-day items. You've got employee relations, going to be fires all time. So having those agents available for those fires, and then having a dedicated person, team, whatever, for just project work, not fighting on projects.
That's interesting as we start to think more about a skills-based, workforce and putting our workforce in a little bit different. Maybe we've looked at it just purely by job description in the past. So interesting concept for us to keep our eyes on, as we hit the horizon and keep moving forward. So that's a great way of putting it. You mentioned you've got that whole list of strategic priorities and they're all important, right? How do you take a look at that list and identify, what are the top 2 to 3 that we need to focus on now? What do you do from a priority?
Yeah, you have to ask the business. You have with the whole leadership team and understand what's important to them. What do they need in order to do their job well? And if, a project or an initiative that you think is more recognizing, there might be a little sales job that you have in there, but working with them and like I said, there's any number of things that you could do. So making sure that what's most helpful to them and what's most helpful to move the business is how you have to make that decision.
We've talked a lot about getting the voice of, your employees, and engagement used to be a, one big survey. We put action plans together. We do some follow-up, maybe 6 months down the road. And I don't think that model works anymore. You said things are changing so often, every 3 months, new needs that come up and new needs that arise. What are you doing at Conifer, to kind of meet the challenges that the old way of looking at engagement maybe presents itself? And maybe what are the things that you're doing to just keep those lines of communication open between, and management or leadership?
One thing that we're put together a handful of additional recognition programs or of acknowledging the things that people do. We have heroes that do stuff every single day, right? And so making sure that we have communities to recognize that. I think is one thing that we have found to be, we have done for years a conference every year for our managers, and we would get together and do training, education, team building, what have you. Because of the pandemic, we couldn't get people together. We did it virtually last year, and we invited all employees, everyone. And that was the first time that we had done, including all employees. And it was very small. So now this year, we do plan to go back to an in-person conference in May, but we are going to live stream the sessions so that people who are still back at the sites can participate, they can hear, they can listen. We're investigating right now what technology we can leverage to be able to get feedback from them while they're not on site with us, and keep them engaged. And then again, I think just regularly checking in with people. A lot of companies do pulse surveys where it's one question. People don't want to do a 15 or a 30 question survey a month, but throwing 1 or 2 questions out there is a good to just hear what's on.
Is because you really talked about the communication, right? And you understand, again, the individualized, you're meeting your employees where they're at, right? Yeah. I think the old practices of HR, and maybe you can speak to this from your days at Constellation Brands and RIT, and kind of, you've worked for publicly traded companies, you work for higher education, you've really worked the gamut, manufacturing, and now here you are in another service-led industry. What have you learned most about communication across industries? Is it similar? Is it very similar? Is it not at all? Like, just you having that experience and working with very different working populations, what have you learned from the communication strategies? And if you want, dovetail into the learning and development side of that as well.
Yeah, man, there's a whole lot that I'm very passionate about communications. So a couple come to mind. The first is you have to tell people, I don't remember what the exact number is. You have to tell people things 7 times before they believe it or repeat it, or that they think that they get it and that they will carry that message forward. So you have to do it often. I have you can turn on a feature where you adapt the reading level of a document. So I like to check the reading level and make sure that it is not too high, right? You want people to quickly. So clear, simple communications, I think, is far easier and far more effective, just long term. The first thing, go to their manager and say, what does this mean for me? So one of the things that I really like doing is if there's a big announcement that's happening with the managers in advance, prep them. Say, here's what's coming. This is why. Putting together efforts for them and make that they are equipped. The employees, they're not saying, I don't know, I just heard it the same time you did. That's the worst you can do on so many fronts. And it really, spending that time, you're really demonstrating to the managers that you respect the position that they're in and the importance of what they do and how they talk to their folks. That's a really critical thing, is getting things into the hands of the managers. I'm laughing because when I was at RIT, there was a big announcement that was about to go out, and the president had written the announcement. It was like 5 pages long, and it was written by somebody who had, a handful of degrees, and it was all really great information, but it was a lot. And so I said to him, I have half an hour to put together an FAQ out to our managers. And so he said, yes, of course. And so getting that, so that even if it was only 2 minutes before the big announcement went out, I could then say, not sure, I have this other message, let me get to that and get back to you. But giving them something that helps. The tricky things, don't currently have this, a company has done in the past. Give managers scripts. There's nothing with giving people exactly what to say. You have to make it easy for them, important things. Otherwise, if they don't do it, then you don't have the same message. It's not the organization. So it's taking care of the little things and having a solid plan and how you're communicating things. That is the most fun.
Things in there. A lot is on giving the management or the leadership team preview goes a long way. And I've seen that countless times where person will come say, hey, thanks for giving us the heads up. That was really helpful. Proposing, here's a recommendation. What are your thoughts, right? So now you can get their buy-in if they've had a chance to kind of be part of it.
Yeah, maybe it's something that you have to communicate. Maybe it's something you have to change how to do. So yeah. So that's an important thing to do.
The other thing you hit on, Barb, which I think is critical for HR professionals, HR practitioners, is that sometimes prescriptive, give them the top script, because not every manager has been through every single situation or scenario, during whatever their or their time with the organization. And again, we don't want to assume. We talked about that earlier, but I think if you can do that and either the talking points or the script or the step-by-step actions, I think really, appreciative of to help them do their job a little bit or be a little bit more effective. In your time, though, we got a list of priorities, and we know we've got to do everything by tomorrow. I wish we had enough time to get everybody involved and get everybody's viewpoint, so that we can make sure that board and in the loop. It's hard to do sometimes.
Yeah, for sure.
That's really neat, and it seems like you're using data, and we're talking about like kind of what the future skills of HR look like. And you mentioned a couple, like the business acumen. I know we talked about developing and establishing those relationships internally with finance, with CEOs, and those senior leadership, but also the middle tier managers. So you're doing a lot of this, and the last thing is that it sounds like you're using data, and that's kind of what Chris and myself and others use data to help us prioritize what's most important, based off those surveys and based off that information. How are you guys using data? And then my second part to that is on those surveys, how I loved your point about how you're communicating what you're doing with that data or that information. So twofold, again, question, but I wanted to see kind of how, because I know you're doing it and I just wanted to ask.
Sure. Yeah, there's data out there that to support whatever you want, right? You can find the argument, you can find what's going to tell the story of what's important, what you're trying to accomplish. Right now we're using, we're looking at how many positions we have open, how long is it taking to fill them. Some managers want stats of how many people applied and how many places did we post a job or advertise a job. I think that there's a lot of things that you can measure and keep an eye on. Always remembering to go back to how it translates from a business perspective, I think is important. Sometimes we have a new person come in, somebody might come into HR and say, geez, it looks like maybe we're a little low on pay in one area or another. Can we give them a raise? When you think about our business right now, the affordable housing, our revenue is rent. We have low-income housing, so the rents are established. And so normal apartment complexes, if they want to give somebody a raise, they just raise the rent to cover that, right? We don't have the ability to do that. So looking at the numbers and helping come up with creative ways for them to come up with solutions. So as an example, we had a handful of openings, and as you know, it's really hard to find people. And so if we look at a geographic area and say, can we leverage these positions differently? And how can I spend that pot of dollars in a way that will be more effective, that we can fill the position sooner? And the more you talk to managers about that, the more they start getting creative on their own of where can they get the money to do the things that they want. So it's a lot about creativity and thinking about things differently.
Yeah, and I love how you're involving the managers within that process so they have more of a shared responsibility. And they're more interested in the outcomes, right? I think that's when you talk to people in talent acquisition and HR, and sometimes it's a huge disconnect between what the manager is looking for and what HR is looking for. But involving them within that process and tapping into their creativity, I think is huge. And I think to Chris's point, will be even more beneficial to you guys as you move forward to identify what skills are actually necessary for these particular roles and positions. Because I think the definitions of these job descriptions are going to continue to change and evolve as well. But I loved the point that you shared, because this is really the quagmire that most businesses are in today, right? Do I have the ability to pass on that increased human capital cost to my consumer or not? And this is the same thing that a lot of nonprofits are having to deal with as well, that are heavily grant funded. Those grants don't change. So how are you guys getting your dollar to stretch further to attract, retain, develop, and engage your talent there, Barbara?
So, for one thing, I'm fortunate that we have amazing leaders here in this organization. They're great. And understanding that they know their job and their employees know their jobs better than you or I ever will. Wow. So tapping into having them remember to check with folks of, all right, how can we save some money? Are there things that we could be doing differently? Is there something that we should be outsourcing because in the long run it would save us money? Or is it something that we can outsource and it's something that people where it's a barrier to attracting someone, right? So if you have somebody that, so as an example, we have properties where we have maintenance folks, and a really very skilled maintenance person, there are things that they are not going to want to do. And so do you hire one higher level maintenance person and one more entry level? You're using those same dollars, but you're getting far better productivity and job satisfaction out of it. So being creative, I think, is really important, and always asking the questions. One of my favorite things to do is to ask the question, what are you trying to accomplish?
Yeah.
When whatever it is that you need to get done, if there's a problem trying to figure out how to do it or how to afford it, try to just think about what is the end goal and what is the objective. And there may be a few paths to get there. And so what are the different ways that you can do it? Can you enlist internal people? People want opportunities to develop and do things that aren't in their day-to-day job. Is there a special action team that you could put together that is actually offloading the work to someone else, but it's somebody who's going to learn from that opportunity and bring brand new ideas that we may have never thought of. So asking a lot of questions and being creative, I think, is really important.
And that's how you probably tap into the innovation side of some of these front end workers and asking them, what are you experiencing? How can we improve? And just asking the right questions, like you said, is so important. And the one thing that you keep saying creative, and I love that, because what I haven't heard is that stretch of the dollar as a sign-on bonus to mirror everything that everybody else is doing right in the marketplace. You really are unique in that you want to open up those constant lines of communications at all levels within the organization, to not only know or keep your finger on the pulse as to, well, what are their wants? What are their desires? How are those changing? And are we changing with that effectively? So Barbara, thank you so much. I really enjoyed that.
Yes, you've given us a lot to think about today, Barb, so really appreciate it. We'll finish off with our final question, and it's kind of the question we ask all of our guests, and it's about the future of work, right? So specifically, we've transform the way work gets done over the last 2 years. We don't see that changing. We think we're going to continue to see transformation. From your standpoint, where do you think we're going to go with this? And what do HR professionals, practitioners, executives need to do to equip themselves to be successful for this ongoing transformation?
Yeah, that is such a great question. I think technology is something that all of us need to think about more. There's more and more solutions out there to help you get done what you need to do, and they're becoming more and more affordable. That flexibility of understanding that there's different ways that you can get the job done, and knowing that you have to build that in and give people options. I think the leading with humility, leading with humanity, and with kindness, I think, is going to be more important in our leaders as we continue to grow. And people are at a place where they're trying to decide what really means a lot to them. So being genuine and opening yourself up to have those conversations and really know what's important to them is what's going to keep people. And I think what makes them far more productive in their jobs, and therefore, it comes out in the bottom line from an ROI perspective, because people are happier, they stay longer, all of those things.
Mm-hmm. And do you think we're at the age where we're going to see people stay in positions for 10, 15, 20 years, like my father?
I don't think jobs change. I don't think jobs stay the same anymore. I think that I don't know that there is a job that will stay the same for 20 years. So no, I don't think that will happen. I think that we kind of went through a cycle where people were changing jobs more frequently. And I think that we've learned a lot as employers about that. And so I think we're building in things that keep people challenged, that will help them stay longer. I think that we will see people stay longer within an organization, but it's because we're providing different things for them to keep them challenged and enjoying what they're doing.
Love that. And I'm spot on. So I think keeping them challenged, making those horizontal shifts rather than always that view of hierarchy, moving up that corporate ladder. I think there's some finding on those alignments of those strengths is so vitally important, like you said, from a return on investment, but overall engagement perspective. I just want to say thank you, Barb, for today's interview. I know I learned a ton, and thank you so much for all those tangible takeaways. I think some of the questions that you really asked, like what are you trying to accomplish first, is such a great question, because then we can work backwards as HR practitioners and professionals, right? If we know that's your desired end state, how are we going to help you get there? So I think a lot of information was shared. a lot of great information for people to learn from. And I just want to say thank you so much for accepting and being an awesome guest here on the HR Revolution.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And it was a pleasure. Thanks so much.